Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome.
Please join us with Lecha Dodi on page 6. Welcome Shabbat.
Lecha Dodi, Livrat Kana, B'nei Shabbat, Kabbalah. Lecha Dodi, Livrat Kana, B'nei Shabbat, Kabbalah. Shabbat Shalom again, and welcome. We're so glad that we can join together, at least in this way virtually. We still are a Kehillah Kedoshah, a holy community, and through the magic of the airwaves, we raise our voices together in song and prayer. Yesterday was an important day on the calendar, not for the Jewish people, but not just for the Jewish people, but for the world. It was an International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is an annual commemoration declared in 2005 by the United Nations. It falls every year on January the 27th. And why did they choose that day? That commemorates the day that the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp was liberated. And it's a very important international celebration. And I know it's somewhat confusing for many of us in the Jewish world because we're so used to commemorating the Holocaust a little later, at the end of April or early in May, when we commemorate Yom HaShoah. And the history here is Yom HaShoah, or the full name actually is Yom HaZikaron LeShoah Ugvura, which was declared in early 1950s by the Knesset in the state of Israel. And that fuller name means the day for remembering the Holocaust and acts of heroism, Ugvura, which is such an important narrative for the state of Israel, that idea that we fight, that we continue on as a people. And it's chosen that to celebrate on that day on the Hebrew calendar, on the 27th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan. It's a week after Passover, a week before Israelis' the Independence Day. And it's also in connection to the beginning of the Warsaw Uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, where a small group of Jews fought off for an entire month the German army in an act of heroism. So we tend to to commemorate here at Temple Yom HaShoah later in the spring. That's why we know it better. But they're both very important commemorations. And I want to share with you something that was put out by the Camp Newman community. The world has changed so much, and yet it has not changed enough. We are reminded of the imperative to pursue the holy work of community building and teaching, so we continue to empower future generations to fight back against hate and say, never again. Not for us, not for anyone. We're reminded just 2 weeks ago that there still is anti-Semitism. It's very much alive and well in our world. We can't allow ourselves to be cowed. As I said last week, we have to stand up proud as Jews. We have to combat anti-Semitism and prejudice and hatred in all forms. And the very best way for us to do that is to stand proud and tall as Jews. So let us celebrate this Shabbat together as our service continues with Shalom Aleichem on page 7. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem HaShalem, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei, Malachei HaMalkim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaShalem, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei, Malachei HaMalkim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boechem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom. Melech Malachem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Malachem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Uni Shalom Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Ni Melech Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Malachem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Malachem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seidechem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom. Malachei Elyon. Ni Melech Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Malachem, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei, Malachei Hasharet, Malach Baruch Hu. Shalom Malachem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One more time. Shalom Malachem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Malachem, Malachem Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei, Malachei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's a lot of fun. Our service continues now on page 8 for those of you who have a Siddur, and we are happy to invite Stacy Sims to light our Shabbat candles and to recite the blessing in honor of her birthday.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom,
shalom,
Stacy.
Stacy.
It's wonderful to see you, and we wish you a happy birthday. And our service continues now on page 9, and we invite you, if you can, to rise physically or in your heart as we continue with our call to worship the Baruch Hu. Baruch Adonai Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please be seated, and we continue chanting together via Hafta on page 10. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha uv'chol meodecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'eleh asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha uv'shartam le'od ayadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha uchtavtam al mizuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru ve'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kedoshim le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lachem Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. For those who have a Siddur at home, let us read together at the top of page 11. Standing on the water's edge, the sea spray on your cheek, close your eyes and feel within the beating of freedom's drum. Listen closely on the breeze. Do you hear the music of the ages? O God, you beat the drum, you are the song, you are the wonder in each of us. With joy and awe, we sing to you this song of freedom.
continue with Vishamru on page 13. Please sing and clap with us.
Shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם.
ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם.
אותי לעולם,
אותי
לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם.
כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני,
עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם.
וביום השביעי שבת וינפש.
שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. We continue with the chanting of the Amidah. Begins on the bottom of page 13, and those who are able, please rise. Adonai, sifatai tiftach, ufi agita hilatecha. Adonai, sifatai tiftach, ufi agita hilatecha. Oh God, open up my lips as I begin to pray. Oh God, open up my lips as I begin to pray. Adonai, sifatai tiftach, ufi agita hilatecha. Adonai, sifatai tiftach, ufi agita hilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, v'Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot, Umevi Geula Libnei V'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, ve'ezrat Sarah.
אתה גיבור
לעולם
לעולם
אדוני, בחיי הכל, אתה רב להושיע. מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמנת לחיות הכל. Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei hakol. Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom, yehallelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. Please be seated. And let us read together on page 15. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu ba'amcha Yisrael, utfilatam be'ahava tekabel, uthi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha, baruch atah Adonai, she'odcha levadcha, be'yir'ah na'avod. Be gracious, O Lord our God, to your people Israel, and receive our prayers with love. May our worship always be acceptable to you. Modim anachnu lach, sha'atahu Adonai Eloheinu, ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu le'olam va'ed. Tzur chayenu, magen yishenu, atahu lador vador. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth, which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we give thanks.
Shalom Rav is on page 16. Shalom Rav, all Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. 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 Ki atahu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav, all Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav, all Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. V'tov einecha v'varech et amcha Yisrael. B'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav, all Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav, all Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam.
this prayer for peace and with this beautiful melody still in our ears, we pause for a few quiet moments for our own individual silent meditation and prayer. I invite you to turn inward to your own heart, to your own mind. Think about the week that is past and the promise of this day of rest ahead. And give thanks for the blessings in your life. Tefillat Halev, the prayer of the heart.
Please join us on page 18.
Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer le'olam, hachol ve'hayam, v'yishru shel hamayim, be'rak hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam, hachol ve'hayam, v'yishru shel hamayim, be'rak hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam. Eli, Eli,
I pray that these things never
hachol ve'hayam,
the rush of the waters, the crash of
shamayim, tfilat ha'adam.
the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens,
Tfilat ha'adam. Well, like most weeks, there's a lot going on in the news to ponder and to talk about. The threat of a Russian invasion on Ukraine, the state of the pandemic and its effect on our economy, the frustration over unchecked violence in our cities that has resulted in the death of several police officers. We watched the dramatic funerals on TV the last few days. But the one important news item that caught my attention while studying our Torah portion for this week, Mishpatim, the one that rang a little bell in my head saying that this is what I should talk about is the announcement by Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer that he will retire at the end of the term. Now, you might guess it grabbed my attention because Justice Breyer happens to be Jewish. It is true, he is Jewish, one of two Jews currently serving on the court. But there's much more relevance to this important transition in the highest court in our country that goes well beyond Justice Breyer's religious identity, because our Torah portion this week happens to be, as I said, mishpatim, which means laws or sentences, as in the ones decided by a court of law. The portion contains, in fact, over 50 laws that are very specific, not just sweeping ethical statements like we received last week with the Ten Commandments, but specific laws that deal with property rights and torts, with rape and murder and theft, laws dealing with every aspect of human relations you could imagine. These are the kinds of issues that percolate their way through our justice system, sometimes making their way up to the Supreme Court, which always has the final word. That's how our justice system works, as it does in most democratic nations. But there's one sentence, one mitzvah in Mishpatim that leaps off the page of the Torah this week and says, pay attention to me, for it has profound relevance and important guidance as President Biden, with the approval of Congress, selects a new judge to take Justice Breyer's place on the court. The Torah says, Elohim lo tikaleo, v'nasi ba'amecha lo tikaleo. You shall not revile Elohim, and you shall not curse a ruler of your people. In the literal reading, this mitzvah seems straightforward. Respect God and respect the rulers of your people, which doesn't seem directly relevant for our topic tonight, but it is the view of Rabbi Yishmael and Rashi and a host of sages who interpret this line that the word Elohim here does not mean God, as it usually does, but judges. And here's why. Having set down that long list of rules and regulations, the Torah, according to the sages, is telling us, commanding us, actually, to respect the authority of judges. For otherwise, the whole legal system breaks down and falls apart, and we have nothing left but chaos. If we look back in the history of our country, we have respected the authority of our judges. And we have empowered our Supreme Court to make very important decisions of great consequence for our country. Let me give you just a few examples from modern American history. Harry Truman confiscated the steel mills in the midst of a labor dispute. The Supreme Court said he could not do that, and Truman backed down and gave the mills back. Richard Nixon believed that he had something called executive privilege that entitled him to refuse to turn over the tapes that Congress demanded from him in the Watergate scandal. The Supreme Court said that he had no such right, and Nixon backed down and ultimately resigned. President Trump more recently appealed to the Supreme Court with the same argument, thinking he had executive privilege, attempting to block documents in the presidential archives from being released to Congress. The Supreme Court, with 3 justices that he appointed, turned him down. Bill Clinton believed that he had no legal obligation to make a deposition in the Paula Jones case. He claimed that the presidency protected him from having to answer frivolous accusations until his term of office was over. The Supreme Court said that he had no such right, and that he must agree to be deposed in the case. And Clinton backed down and was deposed. George W. Bush was certain that he had the right to hold prisoners at Guantanamo indefinitely, and that they were not subject to American law since they were not American citizens. The Supreme Court said no. And George W. Bush backed down and said that he would abide by the court's decision. There was no debate. There was no discussion. No was no. The man who prided himself on being the decider understood that ultimately it is the court that decides and not him. So here are just 5 cases in a row that have occurred in the last half century in which strong presidents, Truman, Nixon, Clinton, Bush, and Trump, some of whom were Republicans and some of whom were Democrats, all of whom believed in the rightness of their views, nevertheless, who accepted the authority of the court. Elohim lo tikaleo. You shall respect the authority of the judges. The rule that we read from the Torah today is a basic tenet of American law. The Torah has given the American system many of its key features. The idea of checks and balances, for instance, comes from the Torah, which believes that no one is so bad that he should have no power, and no one is so good that he should be trusted with all power. The idea with which the Declaration of Independence begins, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, is derived from the Torah's teaching that all human beings are made in the image of God. For otherwise, if you do not accept that premise, in what ways are human beings equal? Some are taller, some are shorter, some are smarter, some less so. It's not self-evident that all people are equal, not unless you take seriously the claim of the Torah that all human beings are created in the image of God. These are just a few examples of how Jewish law has influenced American law. The law that no one can be forced to testify against himself in a criminal case comes from Jewish law. The law that no one can be executed for stealing property comes from Jewish law. And there are many more examples. But I believe that this law, the law that judges must be respected, and that their authority cannot be ignored, is one of the Torah's greatest gift to American law and to human civilization. You can appeal a court's decision in Jewish law, but you cannot cavalierly defy or malign a judge's decision. Why is the word Elohim used in our verse instead of shofet, which is the usual Hebrew word for judge? I can't say for sure, but perhaps it is in order to make the point of how much we should revere and respect a judge. When you stand before a judge, you should feel a sense of reverence. As it says in Psalms, God dwells amongst the judges. One of the greatest wonders of Jewish history is that for many centuries, Jewish judges had no police and no prisons and no authority, and yet people would take their cases to Jewish courts and accept the decisions that the courts set down. I don't know of any parallel to this kind of voluntary acceptance of the law anywhere else. Now, President Biden has vowed that he will appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court, arguing that the leadership in all 3 branches of our government should reflect the great diversity of our country. It wasn't that long ago, mind you, that our Supreme Court justices were all white men, as it had been for centuries. Thankfully, that has changed in the last several decades, as both women and Black justices and people of various faith communities have been appointed. I agree. It's time for a Black woman to join their ranks. But the most important criteria for Biden to consider, as I'm confident he will, is that whomever he selects be eminently worthy of the job. She should be a person of deep wisdom and experience, and someone with a sterling reputation who will earn the respect of Americans from across the ideological spectrum. She should be a person of great integrity and character. I would advise President Biden and his team to consult the Torah this week in making this momentous decision. For along with teaching respect and reverence for judges, the Torah also teaches that judges must be respectable and must be worthy of reverence. He should take heed of the Talmud, which says that a judge must always feel as though a sword is hanging over his or her head when they go up and sit on the bench. A judge who accepts a bribe, whether it be a big one or a small one, whether it be in the form of money or in the form of services, is considered vile and despicable in Jewish law. We sometimes mistakenly think that religion is just about prayer and piety and what we do within the walls of the synagogue. But Mishpatim, our Torah portion this week, comes to teach us that Jewish tradition has a much broader scope. Judaism cares about how we do business, about how we hire and fire, about how we buy and sell, about how we behave in the store and in the office and in the streets. Likewise, Mishpatim not only teaches us about the reverence we must show to our judges, but gives solid advice about what kind of testimony is valid and what kind of penalties are appropriate and what kind of judicial system we need to have. We cannot overstate the importance of all these laws. Make no mockery of justice, say the sages, for it is one of the pillars on which the world stands. As it is taught in Pirkei Avot, the world stands on three pillars: on justice, on truth, and on peace. Take care not to subvert justice, for if you do, you shake the world. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be God's will. Amen. And we wish Godspeed to President Biden in making a good choice as he nominates a new justice to our Supreme Court.
Amen. Yasher koach.
Todah.
We continue with our Torah service on page 20.
And those who are able, please rise as we open the ark.
And we invite Karma up to help us. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Udevar Adonai mirushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Beit Yaakov lechuven elcha be'or Adonai, O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of our God. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Gadol Amo. Ashtosha Devarim, Ashtosha Devarim, Ashtosha Devarim, Haolam, Haolam, Omed. Ashtosha Devarim, Ashtosha Devarim, Ashtosha Devarim, Haolam, Haolam, Omed. Al HaTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Al HaTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim.
The blessing is on page 22.
And I believe Karma is chanting with the line that I cited from Torah in my Devar Torah.
I am.
Thank you, Karma. Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vahed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Elohim lo tekalel v'nasi v'amcha lo ta'or mleacha v'dimacha lo te'acher bechur v'incha titen li ken ta'aseh le'shorcha le'tzonecha shivat yamim yeh imimo bayom hashmini titnu li ve'anshe kodesh tiyun li uvasar vasadeh trefa lo tochelu lakelev tashilichun oto.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Temet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Yashikoah. Thank you. Beautiful chanting. In the presence of our Sefer Torah, we like to recite prayers of blessing for lots of different reasons, but especially prayers for healing for friends and family who need whatever help and strength we can bring them in their time of need, with our visits, with our calls, with our prayers for a full and speedy healing. So we invite you to please share with us in the chat the names of friends and family members who you would like to add to the blessing. And we have on our list here this evening, Casey Campbell-Shadman, Diane Dakin, Randy Watkins, Gabby Lopez-Smith, Rebecca Williams, Victor Altman, Susie Kritzer, Rose Machado, John Kaplan, the Lowy family, Ellen Clore, Jonathan Kelly, Thomas Boggs, Louise Riddle Kaufman, Nan Jacobs, Philip Lipkin, and Mac Andrews.
We add to our Misha Barak list Nati Martinez, Matt and Ronan Glenn Malhot, Emily Crane, Eden Crane, Lisa Rye, Juan Baltazar, Celine Sankari, Barbara Fine, John Rogers, Carol and Steve Ware, Tammy Miller, Jay Berman, Elise Blinder, Cecile Baggett, Diane Drilsma, and Megs McDevitt. The Mishbeach can be found on page 23. Please join us.
And we add to those names mentioned aloud those of us who are in need of these same blessings for refuat hanefesh and refuat haguf, for healing of mind and body and spirit. Baruch atah Adonai rofeh hacholim, blessed are you, O God, who heals the sick. Amen.
Continue with a prayer for our country and the state of Israel. Guardian of life and liberty, grant blessings to our country. Grant our leaders patience and wisdom. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and may we never be lazy in the work of peace. Eternal God, grant blessings to the state of Israel. Protect her people, shelter them with peace, and grant them deliverance from the violence that surrounds them. May they live in harmony with one another and with their neighbors. May the bonds of faith and faith that unite the Jews of all lands be a source of strength and blessing to each of us and to all the world. And let us say, Amen.
Those who are able, please rise.
Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei Bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe ki lekach tov
Natati lachem Torati atazovu Eitz chayim hi lama chazikim ma v'tom teha mehushar deracheha darkei noha לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Please be seated. At the conclusion of each of our services, we take this moment as we remember and hold dear the memory of our loved ones who are no longer with us, those we hold in our hearts and in our minds, and who continue to carry and to bless us. This week, we sadly say, Yizkor Elohim, may God remember a member of our congregation, Gail Weiss, who is remembered with love by her daughter, Leslie Weiss, her son-in-law, Michael Bullard, and her grandsons, Gabe and Nico. Gail was a great lady, filled with energy and spirit, and we will miss her dearly. May her memory be for a blessing. We invite those of you who are joining us virtually to share with us the names of your friends and family members, people who have died recently, those for whom you are in either the period of Shiva or Shloshim, the 30-day period, or Shana, the 1-year period of mourning. The following names are the names of loved ones who have a yortzeit, the anniversary of their death sometime in the week ahead. We remember with love Werner Epstein, Jack Ruskin, Hannah Gore, Claudia Adamson, Andy Heisler, Peter Jacoby, Gerald Rothman, Jack Vogel, Molly Wallen, Carl Friedel, Anna Kaminsky, Leo Kaminsky, Abraham Primack, Morris Stein, Max Kopman, Grace Reichel, Sid Stein, and Irma Cervelli.
And if I don't say the name of your loved one, please say aloud or in your heart their name as we remember Herm Lewin, Joey Robinow, Helen Schneider, Betty Myers, Laura Lee Southern, Philip Blair, and Gary Gershon.
Zichronam livracha, may the memory of all these precious loved ones be for a blessing and a never-ending source of strength. And we remember and hold in our hearts all those who have died of COVID-19 in our country and around the world. And certainly appropriate this week, the day after the commemoration of the International Day of Memory for the Holocaust, we remember the 6 million who were murdered, who died in the Holocaust for no reason other than the fact that they were Jews. May their memories be for a blessing. We remember all of these souls, the dearly departed, along with our own loved ones who have died, as we rise and recite together the words of our mourner's Kaddish.
Page 26.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, b'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon v'yomechon, uv'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kari v'yimru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach leolam ulomei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei dekudisha v'richu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom bimromav, huya osei shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort the bereaved among us. And let us say, Amen.
And thank you tonight to Steve Schermerhorn, Beth Sanders, and Carlos Lopez for your uplifting prelude music. If you didn't get a chance to hear it, go ahead on a rewind and listen. It was really wonderful tonight. Thank you. Also, thank you to Karma for a beautiful chanting. We always appreciate it. And happy birthday to Stacy Sims, and thank you for doing the candle lighting. We also have birthdays of Lori Maldonado, Rachel Battershell. I was thinking about her tonight as we were singing Shalom Rav. Lori Nassanow, Ray Golub, and a happy 75th birthday to Nancy Dumas.
Happy birthday.
If you would like the honor of lighting the candles for Shabbat or having an aliyah in an upcoming service, please let me or Karma know. We'd really love to include you. And thank you, Ari, for keeping us on the live stream. And Learning Lab continues as scheduled, as do our adult classes this coming week. That is it for the announcements. Please join us with Osei Shalom on page 27.
Osei shalom bimroma, huyaseh shalom aleinu. Osei shalom bimroma, huyaseh shalom aleinu. Osei shalom bimroma, huyaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Osei shalom bimroma, yaseh shalom aleinu. Osei shalom bimroma. Shalom bimroma, yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. 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 Have a wonderful Shabbat and a wonderful weekend ahead and a safe week. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Mwah.